Well, good Saturday afternoon to you. How is everyone doing today? I, of course, am your friendly local neighborhood, the Dungeon Delver, aka Bill Sylvie. Welcome to this this Saturday afternoon live stream. I know this is kind of a rare thing for me, but when my buddy Matt Finch came to me and said, "Hey, I've got something really cool, and I'd love to share it with you guys," I didn't want to wait on the matter. All right, so I said, "Let's strike while the iron's hot." So Matt got some time free today. I made some time free today, and he's going to be out in just a minute to talk to us about some very, very cool news on the swords and wizardry front, of course. But I do want to remind you folks, of course, that today's show is brought to you by our sponsor, Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde Games makes the kind of adventures that they'd like to play, whether it's for 5th edition Castles and Crusades or the OSR. Old School is in play at the table, and you can check them out on their website at hellebardegames.com or on DriveThruRPG. That's Hellebarde Games. So, speaking of the OSR, when you talk about the OSR, there's a rarefied air of folks who really essentially kickstarted the old school revival, the old school renaissance. And my guest today is a force majeure in that area because so many people I know have talked about, well, you know, Pathfinder got to be too many books. 3rd edition, was not my jam. 4th edition was just, superhero fantasy characters on steroids. I went back for something simpler. I went back to an easier source. I went back to swords and wizardry. And so that brings us to our guest today, the man responsible for that, for essentially creating an entire subgenre. Let's welcome him. He's a buddy of mine, and I think you're going to like what he's got to show us today. MATT FINCH. Matt, how the heck are you, my friend?
I'm good. How's it going, Bill?
It's going all right. It's going all right. We got a good crowd out there. It's good to see everyone. Thank you all for stopping by. So, Matt, how have you been?
Oh, pretty good. I was looking to see how many people are in the room at the moment. I can see a lot of people typing. It doesn't show me on YouTube how many people are in here, though.
Well, according to now, here's the thing. I've come in and I've seen like 10 people talking in the chat.
Yeah.
And my speedometer, as it were, being shown by StreamYard says 0 people.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there have been times when I've seen one chat from one person and it says I've got 15. Yeah. So there's anywhere between 0 and 30 people watching right now.
All right. Fair enough. So just to let everybody know, Bill and I go way, way, way back, even before the beginning of what people call the OSR. We were probably talking since about 2002 thereabouts. I would guess.
Yeah. We I think we bumped into each other first at Dragon's Foot. Yeah.
Either there or maybe even on the old Wizards of the Coast forums. Wizards of the Coast actually used to have forums, but
That's right. They had their own Usenet basically fork that they did for a while, but it was dead as Dillinger. But then when they set up a primitive bulletin board forum, or no, that was TSR that had to use.
No, this is before I was on. This is when Wizards of the Coast, after 3rd edition, they had forums with all the 3rd edition stuff on there, and a whole bunch of us met each other there because they had like one subcategory buried way deep in there for people who played older editions, and a lot of us met back in that part of the place.
When they pretended to give lip service and room to classic Dungeons and Dragons back in the. Hey, Will Mistretta, I see you over there. I've actually known Will in a funny way that it's too internet boneheaded to even launch into, but I have known Will almost as long as I've known you, believe it or not.
Will, probably about the same period of time.
Yeah. Will and I met on the old POE forums. If you know what that is, I'm very sorry for you in the audience. I'm sorry I do, but I met good friends over there. But anyway, so you know, what is the haps lately, man? I know you've got something pretty awesome there in your pocket to show us. So what's going on? What's the news?
Yeah, and I think most people watching the show probably know this is going to be no big surprise.
This is not a big secret, guys. Okay,
yeah.
this is no Tesla truck or Luke is Vader's son moment here.
This is no, we're doing a Kickstarter for the new version of Swords and Wizardry, which has got a fairly large number of fairly minor fixes and tweaks and so on to it. And since we mentioned Will Mistretta already, part of the things that are going in are some errata that he has patiently posted since about the year 2008, 2010, and has reminded me with each successive version of Swords and Wizardry, there are these little things, and we generally haven't made them. I've been really against making too many modifications to the game, because I'm not trying to force people to buy each edition as it comes out. But so we've got those in there, and there are two main reasons for doing a new version of it. Number one is, the last one is pretty much sold out. Frog God Games had the box set. I think they're down to less than 100 or even sold out possibly on those. But since I left Frog God Games, we want to get a new version of Swords and Wizardry out in print under Mythmere Games. So that was point number one. And then point number two, Wizards of the Coast came along and did the whole thing with the OGL where they tried to revoke it. And although they have decided not to revoke it for various reasons, we are moving off of it as well. And I actually discussed those in a thing that was released earlier today. It's a podcast with Shane Thayer, Logar the Barbarian, where I was talking about, there are still some risks involved in continuing to use the OGL for people. And in the interest of I won't go into repeating it because a lot of people will have seen that. It's a pretty short little thing, but I have reasons not to want to stay with the OGL. And so we're using the Creative Commons license to allow Swords and Wizardry to use whatever intellectual property it is that is copyrightable that's coming from Wizards of the Coast, if any. And then we are going to do a license to allow publishers to publish Swords and Wizardry material, which will either be, if Paizo does actually come out with the ORC license in a reasonable time frame, we'll use that. Otherwise, I've also been talking to Mark Greenberg and working up something that is very much like the OGL, because we're all familiar with how the OGL works. Reviewing a new legal contract is very, very difficult and time consuming for people. So this operates a lot like the OGL, but with the fixes in there that are required, like making it irrevocable. We're still talking about how exactly to tinker with the trademark compatibility thing. But anyway, I'm going off kind of into a rabbit hole, because what I'm talking about here is probably more interesting to publishers only. So,
no, that's okay. Actually, Hill, I'm sorry, Hill Descent, and I mutilated your name when I tried to type it. You said I was really hoping for more licensing info. Maybe we can put out on that and kind of extricate a little bit more info from you. But let's talk about the game. And I want to lean over here. I didn't want you to think I was just getting up and walking off. The hell with this, but I want to show you guys, for those of you who have been living under a rock and you're not sure what we've been talking about with Swords and Wizardry, I've actually got here, hang on a minute. This is a box set that Frog God put out, and if it looks a little reminiscent of a certain something that was for sale in January of 1974 originally, that's no mistake. But this is Swords and Wizardry, and I'm going to leave it up to Matt to kind of give us the 10,000-foot view on how we got here.
Sure. Well, actually, what we're going to be coming out with on the Kickstarter is closer to this, because what we're doing is not a box set, but a single volume book again, simply because putting together a box set it involves some pretty heavy lifting on logistics. And also people seem to be about split 50-50 between, I prefer to have a box set because it's cool and because I only have to have one little booklet for the specific thing I'm looking at, or the other people who are I want to have it all just in one place because that way I don't have to fiddle around with multiple little booklets, and everybody seems to be split on that. So since it's easier, we're going ahead and doing for the first launch of Swords and Wizardry under Mythmere Games, we're just doing the book version of it, and then a box set may come later down the road. Since we did have a question about licensing, what we'll do is once we're sort of wrapped up in talking about the game, then we'll go on and we could talk more about detail and licensing if that works for you, Bill.
Dude, I am cool with whatever direction you want to take.
Okay, so I guess the sales pitch, which again most people probably know, but some people may not be familiar specifically with Swords and Wizardry. I think most people on here are probably somewhere in the old school gamer descriptor, even if it's people who play 5th edition in a more old school way. What Swords and Wizardry is specifically, it's a retro clone of original D&D. And it's all of original D&D, meaning that it's not just the first 3 books. It's also the various supplements that came out for that game and were released up until 1978. And it includes a bunch of material from the Strategic Review, which then became The Dragon Magazine, which was published by TSR, and which included a lot of resources for original D&D. So this game actually includes more than has ever been published for OD&D in any single place, because it's got the stuff from the magazine articles as well, which is why we have a Ranger class, which there wasn't a Ranger originally released with it. And so the result of that is you get something that's about as simple as Moldve Basic D&D in terms of the game mechanisms. It's maybe a slight bit more complicated, but it's about in that region. But it covers more character classes and more incidental information like building strongholds, probably more spells. So it's a lot like the complexity level of BX D&D with more resources in it. And OD&D was actually a very robust and well fleshed out game in the year 1978 when they switched over to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons to have a better brand name. And went to the book formats, but it really is there's much more that's been written for OD&D than most people realize. So that's the lead in, and like any OSR game, because I can't, there's not much of a matter of competition in terms of the fast play or anything like that, but it is obviously faster play than most modern fantasy rule sets. It is simpler to generate characters than for most fantasy rule sets that are out right now. I mean, even Shadow Dark, which looks like, I haven't looked at their stuff, but it looks like they're doing a pretty good job in terms of dialing 5e back to a more OSR more old school sort of approach. But even that book is a 300-page rule book, whereas Swords and Wizardry logs in at 144 pages. So it's going to be a $35 buy-in. It's going to be, part of the goal here is to continue the effort of making old school game resources readily available, inexpensively available to a large number of people, so that we don't lose those original rule sets. And particularly in the case of Swords and Wizardry, given that it's original D&D, there is no single original rule book for it. So in terms of that sort of preservational approach to it, that's sort of more important for original Dungeons and Dragons than it is, for the later old school versions up to 2e. So.
Well, there you have it.
So fill in.
That's fine. Oh, greetings, Lightmane. Good to see you. But you hit on something that I think is so important, and this this is not call out. This, I don't do that on this channel, but I think a lot of retro clones, things that have come since Swords and Wizardry and since Osric, have kind of missed the point. This is not about replacing. This is so you don't have to take this to a comic book store with you and hope nobody sits on it or knows what it is and decides to put it in their backpack, or you get Dr. Pepper spilled on the booklets. It is a complete reflection of original Dungeons and Dragons as it stood in 1978. I would wager if you could go back in time with this or with the complete book and present that to Gary and say, hey, just put AD&D on this. You'd probably, once he asks you what is that supercomputer with the flat screen in your pocket you keep showing me,
yeah, exactly.
would probably jump onto that. So, that this is what I call the good end of the OSR pool, Swords and Wizardry, and again Osric, because it is a complete representation of what OD&D was back in the day, or in the case of Osric, AD&D. But it really is such a great vehicle for people who never played, and for one reason or another, they don't want to give Wizards of the Coast money to get the PDFs and then hassle with printing them out or carrying an electronic device around with them. It lets us play a game. It opens up access to a version of D&D that a lot of folks just simply wouldn't have access to otherwise. And I think a lot of people overlook just how robust those rules can be. I've run Swords and Wizardry and original Dungeons and Dragons at events, and I've never had someone walk away from the table and say, well, that sucked. I hated that. Those rules were too simple. They were too lightweight. They weren't complex enough. Yeah, I mean, it does an amazing job at what it does, which leads nicely into the question of what are you changing in the new edition? Like what other than the licensing stuff? Let's be clear about that. That's another discussion, and a Dissident, I promise, will come back to it if Matt has time. But what are we going to see that's different in the W?
I don't have my complete list here, but most of the things on the complete list are relatively minor. In terms of the major things that we're doing, we're fixing up the treasure table, because the old treasure tables had a trade-out concept in it, where if you had a certain number of gold pieces, you checked to see whether some of that was actually a gem or whether it was a magic item or thing. And that was kind of clunky, and it wasn't intuitive for people. So we have folded that into the tables to where you don't have to execute another step to check for whether there's a magic item or something, and it was just part of the way of doing it in there. So that's fixed. And then the other major change, and probably from the perspective at least of Dungeon Masters, it's the major one, is that the old experience point table for monsters, the experience point you got for killing monsters, flattened out fairly early on the chart, and so we've lengthened the exponential expansion of the experience points so that you get more experience points for killing the higher level monsters. And that was just one fix. Experience points were always a little bit question mark in OD&D, because the very first version of it just said you got 100 experience points per hit die of the monster, and that didn't work at all, and they've changed that around in Greyhawk, but it's so it's a little bit of a moving target there as to what's appropriate, and so we've come out with an answer that I think is somewhat better than what we had in the last version of the game. Everything else is relatively minor changes, like for the monk, we didn't have a concept in there of if you don't have certain stats, you cannot play this character class. But the monk is relatively super powered, given what they can do. So what we folded into that was that if you have, the minimum dex requirement that was there for the monk, then you can do the super dexterity monk stuff. And if you have enough of the wisdom prerequisite, then you can do the super powered wisdom stuff. So you're going to have different sort of versions of the monk depending on the attribute scores of the player. The DM's not going to want to do that because it's too much to keep track of, but for a player, it'll work, and then the DM will just assume that the monk has, all of the minimum stats, I think. So that's one thing. We changed some prices around. We changed the thief climb ability around. We fixed that dwarves, I think, were better at unlocking things than other ancestry types, and so there was that, I think, got fixed, and just lots of little little fixes like that. There's not gonna be anything that will require you to buy the new edition, unless you're looking to publish something, in which case you'll probably want to do that just to make sure that you're current on what the current version is, but it's not going to affect the usability of any of the existing books.
Right on.
Okay, so, and let me also, we had a question about the cover, since all that people are seeing right now is that Kickstarter graphic that's got 2 alternate covers on there. Some people aren't sure whether one of those is like a Kickstarter exclusive or something like that. It's not. What that is the blue version is going to have the same materials as Tome of Adventure Design, which was the actual question that was asked. So it's going to have that sort of smooth but very matte finish, non-gloss finish, except for the rune that's on there is going to be, this is called a spot gloss, is the procedure that's used there, and so that the gold area there, that will be shiny, and it will be against a very, very matte non-reflective cover, which is, I think, it's absolutely a gorgeous way of putting together a book. My only problem with it is that it does show fingerprints really well on the matte surface, but I guess you can't have everything. So yeah,
you take your advantages where you can get them. So
wait. But what I was going to say was, just finish the thought, was that, so that's going to be the offset print version, so that if you're buying a book and we're going to ship it to you, that's going to be the one that we ship to you. But there's also, because there are countries like Brazil and Australia where shipping costs are very, very high, we're also going to do a print-on-demand version, and that's going to be the Arrow Lotus thing. And so in the Kickstarter, what you do is you go in and you basically you pledge only for the amount that's going to be the profit to Mythmere Games, and then you get a code, and then that code, you go to DriveThruRPG, you put in your code, and it will print you a copy of the book for a non-marked up price. So you're only paying the cost of printing the book and shipping it. So, and it works out the same. And we're trying to make it to where those will cost the same, $35, depending on whichever version you get. The offset print version will obviously be a higher durability version, because it's going to be Smythe sewn in signatures, which the print on demand version won't be. But that's the reason that we've got two different covers showing there, is that one of them is the offset version and one of them is the print on demand version.
Right on. So we do have some questions here that popped up. I starred these. I just want to. LeChat wants to know why there is no morale monsters rules for Swords and Wizardry.
Okay, I think the best answer to that is probably that the area where that shows up in original D&D is in the description of the charisma modifiers, and it gives you some numbers for hirelings and hedge. It was not as fully developed as you see it in BX D&D, where they have the whole system of making morale checks and so forth. So it was not a very big part of the OD&D game, and the concern with that was that that would step on some legal toes in there, and I also didn't want to force DMs, because people are sort of split between how they want to handle morale, and people don't want to get forced to be doing a dice check when there may be something that's absolutely obvious these guys are going to run at this point. So that's sort of the answer there.
Okay.
And it's admittedly not a very good answer, but that is the answer.
Well, remember too, folks, I mean, there's plenty of classic D&Ds with morale systems. It's not going to break Swords and Wizardry if you use one of those, Volcano God, we are talking about Swords and Wizardry with creator MATT FINCH here. Let's see. Alexander asks, doesn't Swords and Wizardry have a uniform save system?
It's not a uniform save system. What Swords and Wizardry has, okay, so let's go back to OD&D. What OD&D has is several very distinct categories of saving throws, and there was a slight legal issue with this, because when we originally did this, and later, of course, they've changed the saving throw system now. So there is not a legally usable version that has those categories. So the question is, how do you duplicate as closely as possible those various categories of saving throws without actually using categories of saving throws? And the answer is, you give a single target number for the for whatever character class it is, but you give that character class modifications depending on what the type of saving throw is. So it actually mimics the original D&D saving throw version fairly closely, but it's doing it with a single saving throw and then a modifier based on your class, which then wraps back to that functions very similarly to a series of categories.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Michael Connor asks, and I think I understand this question. Michael asks, any funnels?
No, the funnel is an idea that came in with Dungeon Crawl Classics, which was the idea of starting with a bunch of 0 level characters and then just basically winnowing them out to see which of them survive. If I understand what the funnel thing is correctly, from when people were talking about it a lot, and OD&D just really hasn't ever worked, along those lines. The characters in OD&D, at least once you get past White Box, they're relatively durable because the OD&D characters, once in Greyhawk, they introduced the larger dice types for hit dice in very, very original White Box D&D. Every character class had 1d6 hit points, so good for magic users, bad for fighters. By the time you get into Greyhawk, your fighters have a d8 hit die, and your magic users have a d4. So overall, they're generally somewhat more durable.
Okay, well, I hope that answers your question there, Michael. Chat has a follow-up. Matt doesn't use morale then? You'll have to ask Matt.
No, but monsters run when it's smart for monsters to run, and they stay in there when it's smart to stay in there. And I don't really use dice to determine when that happens. I just do it based on thinking about it from the monster's perspective.
Right. I mean,
more importantly, also from the NPC's perspective, because I think the whole morale system in OD&D was sort of more, I think, geared, and you can see this because it's in the charisma modifiers. It was more geared toward whether your torchbearer was going to cut and run and leave you without light in the middle of fighting a beholder.
Yes. LeChat says, thank you. Brian Thomas says, will the new book have all new art inside?
Yes, it will have all new art. We are using some stock art from James Shields, who probably a bunch of people know. He's an old buddy from North Texas. And but yes, it will. I think it's all new art. Actually, I think we've got one picture from the old one. There are a few art pieces, that I had the rights from Frog God to use the stuff that was in the earlier books, for art. And I think we've kept a couple of those, but for the most part, it's all new art. We've got Del Tigler has done a different piece for each of the character classes. So it's predominantly new. And since I mentioned North Texas, let me just represent here. Here's my North Texas shirt. Everybody go to North Texas. It is an excellent gaming convention. Is coming up in June in Dallas. Forgive the fact that it's Dallas. We in Texas, outside of Dallas, don't really, lay claim to Dallas, but that's the way it is. But yeah. I'm gonna be there. Susie's gonna be there. We'll sign any books that are out. The Swords and Wizardry books probably won't be out by then. They might be, but probably not. But we'll have some Tome of Adventure designs there. We're not going to have a booth, but we're going to be there. So that is for the next year until the next convention cycle comes around. That's really the only one that we're going to. So come and see us at North Texas.
Yeah, I wish we could. See each other at GaryCon, but I completely get it.
Yeah, GaryCon was great when you can drive there. So when we were living in Indiana, we were hitting the Midwestern cons, but once you have to take a plane there and go to Wisconsin,
Yeah, it's
cold. It is so cold in Wisconsin, even from Indiana. Wisconsin is cold.
Yeah, I went in 2018. Saw you up there in 2018, Volcano God, and I actually went, and I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. And I don't think it tickled north of 19 degrees the entire time we were there. And that was early March. That was was that early March or was that late February? I don't remember when it was, but it was cold for this Florida boy. And I also completely get the travel thing. was blessed enough by my community that they're sending the missus and I to GaryCon this year, which is
Can they send you to North Texas?
Hey, beggars.
We don't know how many people are watching this stream. I mean, let's get some cash together and send Bill to North Texas, so I can sign his book. I'll make it, real formal and great big, signature on his book.
That is entirely up to the audience. They have poured their hearts and their wallets out for me, so I certainly don't want to go back to that well too often.
I'll kick in $25, but it's not worth more than $25 for me to see you at North Texas.
I'm only a $25 expense.
That's about it. I'd say, it's.
Well, it's nice to know that I'm keeping up with that I'm keeping up with inflation at least. I think the going price for a Bill Sylvia appearance has been you can grab a Coke out of the cooler in the bar in the back, and we'll include you on the store's Subway order at lunch. But
double the size of your channel, and you can start getting special guest stuff for conventions because they know you'll be talking about them on the air.
There you go. A couple more questions here. You guys are just all about the questions.
Which is good. Keep them coming, because otherwise the show ends, and
Yeah, it's just Matt and I staring awkwardly at each other with 8 people who've forgotten to shut their browser. Will says, I noticed that the stat blocks in Monstrosities have a number appearing, but the one in SNWC don't. The dungeon tables cover this pretty well, but maybe the wilderness tables could put them in parentheses or something.
Which numbers are we talking about?
I'd ask Will. I don't know. But yeah, Will.
Let me go look at the question.
If you could. I
got to scroll around here.
Yeah, I unstarred it there after I asked it. I'm sorry. Ross says, I'm in Georgia myself, been a long-time volunteer, RPG staff member for DragonCon. Excellent. That's wonderful.
All right. Okay, so it's number appearing is what it was, and I missed that when you read out the question. So the ones in Swords of Missouri don't. Okay, so yeah, and that's the issue is where do you need it? And we have got the dungeon generation system, but I'm going to have to think about that, Will, because that may be something that we actually go in and do. So I'm making notes to myself here. And then we may not, because putting an extra line in each monster bar may cause Susie to kill me, because if that changes the layout around, then that won't be a workable thing. But what we might do would be to put in something on the no, we wouldn't be able to put it in on there. Okay, sorry. This is what it sounds, when somebody's thinking about game design out loud, and it's you just start mumbling to yourself like an idiot. So
let's see.
I answered the question, so yeah.
You did questions here. Let me go back over. Oh, I just want to catch a couple of very good comment. All your comments are good, guys, by the way. Thank you. Whether you're just saying hello or you have a question or you have something positive to say about Swords and Wizardry or classic RPGs, whatever, keep it coming. We love to see it. Will says, I think this was in reference to my comment about you can run OD&D and people will have a good time. Ran the home sample dungeon with SW&C at a con and the group loved it. Of course they did. Luigi, we were talking about box sets earlier, says there's a trend of making games as luxury goods instead of items intended for casual use. I think you do kind of see that in things that are maybe a little bit more leaning on the game as income funnel than game design, something I wanted to share because I love it.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important for game publishers to keep in mind that it's not all about the deluxe sets. The real issue is, people who are out there, and especially people who are on a relatively tight budget. And, I think that's the group that we've really got to support, regardless of what game it is, is to get something that's out there that's affordable.
Yes, beyond any shadow of a doubt. This is a hobby where, in my opinion, the only gate that should be kept is, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? Like that's it. Yes, come on in. No, there's guys playing Stratego over there. Go give that a try. But
Chris Kane is here. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris Kane. Greetings. Jason Karam asks, the new iteration of Swords and Wizardry rules, which version of the D&D system will it be based on? Also, will it have all the AD&D spells?
It will not, because it is based on original D&D. Meaning the 3 box sets plus other material that was done for OD&D. AD&D came out later, so we do not include the AD&D spells. For the if what you want to play is a retro clone of Advanced D&D First Edition, the one you're looking for is Osric.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've often maintained that if you're playing OD&D with everything from the Dragon and the Strategic Review and all of the supplements, you're like 91.386% of the way to AD&D anyway, right?
Yeah. Although there are some differences, like not having neutral clerics. You know, there are a lot of weird little differences between the games that, and I'm not even sure that all of those are intentional. I'm sure that letting alignment get broader for clerics, I'm sure that was deliberate, but there are a lot of things in there that I'm not even sure were intentionally changed from one to the next. Just artifacts of the change.
Oh, agreed. Speaking of change, LeChat asks, is it LeChat or LayChat? You'll have to let me know.
It could be LeChat.
LeChat, it could be. Due to the backstep of WotC, will you still change the spell names?
No. The SRD that they've released into the Creative Commons license, which we're going to use, includes a list of the various spell names. So we don't have to change any of the spell names. And that was a big issue for backward compatibility, because if we had been forced to go, completely free of any copyright protection and had to change the spell names, then everything that everyone's ever published as a resource for the game is suddenly going to be off to a noticeable degree. So I was really glad that we were able to keep the spell names the same. I had some really, really good ones too, which was a shame, but it's still better to keep them the same.
Right on. Will asks, will the PDF be free?
Not initially, no. It'll be cheap. We're looking at doing like a $4.99. I think on Kickstarter it has to be $5. I don't think they allow things, but it'll be $4.99 on DriveThruRPG, because that gets us into the less than $5 category on their thing. So it will be inexpensive, and down the road, we may release it for free. The other free ones are out there. We might come out with a free version of the PDF or something like that. But as a still starting up company, we're trying to recoup the costs reliably. So not free, maybe free in the future. No clear answer yet.
Sure. Crap phone, which, by the way, I got to say, I love that. It's just like your username covers all possible issues that might come up with your communications. That's direct and to the point. I like it. Says, came in late. Will it have hit locations?
No. OD&D has never had hit locations, and this is a retro clone, so we're trying to hew as closely as possible to the original. I see Bill's finger up in the air. If you're going to correct me on OD&D history, I'm going to reach out and smack you. But
I am because TSR released arguably, until the Forest Oracle, their worst D&D product ever, which was Bio 1. Which was a pamphlet-sized game supplement. I've talked about it on the show. Let me tell you what, if you ever
I'm not familiar with this. I mean, I'm no D&D historian. You're definitely more so than I am, but this must have been so bad that I've never even heard of it.
If you find, the best thing about Bio 1 is the body location chart is actually done on graph paper, and it makes a really keen dungeon map. That is literally all that Bio 1 is good for. If you find a copy in a used bookstore or at the discount bin at a convention, buy it and then sell it and buy something better. Bio 1 is terrible, but Unfortunately, yes, you can use it as a hit location chart for original D&D. You just shouldn't.
You just shouldn't. Okay. You have to ask, should I as well as can I?
Yes.
Well, that's a piece of OD&D lore I was not aware of, so I'm indebted to you for that one. However, Swords and Wizardry does not have hit location charts, and in general, even in other systems, I'm usually against the idea of critical hits against either characters or monsters, at least not serious critical hits, just because it tends to randomize things more. Some people like them. I generally tend in my own gaming, I usually stay away from those.
Yeah,
there was a great one in Dragon 39, though, best issue of Dragon magazine ever, and it was the one before I got my subscription. And I had a copy of 39 that I bought at Nan's Toys here in Houston, Texas. Dragon number 39 was the best Dragon issue ever.
That had good hits and bad misses in it, didn't it?
Good hits and bad misses. It had the anti-paladin in it, and there was something else too. It might have been a grappling, I think it was an unarmed combat table in there, which none of it was usable, but it was all great stuff.
Yeah. No, when we were kids, it was amazing. Even I had that issue, and I never got Dragon when I was a kid because my parents there was a whole thing, and we've talked about it on the show before with the moral panic and all, but even I had that issue of Dragon. Didn't understand a damn thing in it, but I had it. And I will say that for me, like Dragon 114 with the final version of The Witch almost edges out 39, but it is a very good issue. But I want to stop.
Stop talking about Dragon magazine and get back on topic.
Good old boys conversation, because we're here for you. Brian Thomas wants to know, will there be a new GM screen to go along with the new book?
Not for this one, because what we're doing here, we're trying to get the book out as fast as possible, as simply as possible, without any logistical flaws. So all we're doing on this is a book. We're not planning any stretch goals. Now, if this thing actually comes to the sort of levels of Shadowdark, I mean, if we start talking $200,000 or $300,000, then I'll start thinking about adding some more stuff in to it. But the plan right now is just down and dirty. Here's the book. It's done. We're going to get it out to you guys. You can start playing. If you're a publisher, you can start publishing. And then we're going to do another Kickstarter, which will be the next Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter that we do. Will have all of the supplemental type stuff. So it'll have probably a monster book, a GM screen. A whole lot of people want to have some more character options in there. And so we'll probably do something that's kind of like an Unearthed Arcana kind of book to get that stuff in, and along with a monster book and a GM screen, and just the general stuff that you expect to flesh out a game system. But the fact of the matter is, it's been around as a game system since 2008. So that stuff is out there for people to use. So it's not tremendously important that we get that stuff out with this particular Kickstarter alongside the rules. It's probably more important that we just get the rules out there for this version of the thing. So that's the thinking behind that. So
right on. Hilda says, nice, give my wallet a break and then hit me again later.
Absolutely. That's the plan.
That's the plan. You don't milk a cow all at once. But to that point, Lord Cask asks, how much does the book cost?
$35.
$35, and I mean that is definitely in keeping right now with what you're paying, and it's a complete role playing game system. It's not like here's the book, now there's splat books. Now, that rule wasn't explained. That's coming in Rule Explaining Volume 2, the Explanation.
Actually, at this point with inflation, I think that's relatively cheap. I think most people would be selling a roughly 150-page book. I think would usually be selling it for about $40 to $40 to $45. But inflation's moving so fast that no one really knows exactly where it's all going to land. But this is a relatively inexpensive book. So.
I'm not sure yet, but you might just be able to mail Matt a few cans of ravioli and some 9mm ammo and get a copy of the Swords and Wizardry book. But anyway, sorry, going a little post-apocalypse on you there. Other David Enyon asks, will the new edition keep the alternative initiative system? I note Matt has used Dex as initiative.
Yes, it'll keep all of the various alternatives, because especially for initiative, because the thing about OD&D is it didn't actually have an initiative system until like supplements, whichever supplement Eldritch Wizardry was. It was a long time, because what Gary was trying to cross-sell chainmail with OD&D, and so he just said, use the chainmail system, and if you don't have a copy of chainmail, go and buy it. And chainmail being an actual war game. So there has never been a real official initiative system. Plus, I'm not really fond of the initiative system that they did write in Eldritch Wizardry, which is quite complicated. And so what we did was we talked to a bunch of the people who played OD&D back in the old days, and we talked to Tim Kask. And if Lord Kask, if that's Tim, hi, but I bet it's not, because I don't think Tim would be watching the two of us talk on a YouTube channel. So I talked to Tim Kask, various different people who played back in the day, Steve Marsh, Diesel, and heard from them what the different initiative systems were that they used. Plus, we used the one that my friend Jim and I used when we were kids, which I think may have come from Holmes Basic. It's basically, there were a lot of different initiative systems out there. All of them accomplish different things depending on what your goal is. And so in the rule book, we laid out all of them, plus a little bit of commentary about, if you're using this system, this is the result. In convention games, when I've got a lot of players there, I use one that is, it seems like it would be long and clunky, but what it does is it goes around the table a couple of times so that everybody, you're moving fast and getting a chance. And that's the thing of, doing, first missiles and then going around and doing melee. So, yes, it will have multiple different alternative initiative systems.
Okay. They racked and stacked on us here with a question. So, Volcano God, I'm actually going to come back to that one after I go through the short questions. Calvinoni asks, how many pages is it?
104. Well, it's 140 right at the moment. It may lengthen a little bit as a result of putting in the license. It may lengthen a little bit because of art, but and it will have to be 144 pages because we're sewing the thing in signatures, so it has to be a multiple of 8. So the likelihood is it's going to be 144 pages. It might be 8 pages longer than that if for some reason we add a bunch of stuff to it.
And for those of you who don't know anything about press layout, 144 pages that's 8 pieces of paper, right?
All of it is done in 8s, in multiples of 8 pages.
Basically, it's 8 pieces of paper folded and cut and folded and cut and folded and cut. It's kind of like making a Japanese sword, but there's not weeaboo mythology behind it. Anyway, James X says, new edition coming to Kickstarter. Yes, we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Kenneth Stiff asks, will there be any quick start options, i.e. starter adventure, sample characters, etc.?
Once again, that'll probably be in a following Kickstarter rather than being anything in this one, unless the thing becomes to such a size that we really feel like we have to add some more stuff, in there. But right at the moment, no, there's not any of that in the core rule book, really. But again, that's probably a resource that we will. My expectation is that there will be a second Kickstarter down the line where we give people a bunch of choices of, you could get this, you could get that, you could get this, you could get that.
Right on.
We're using a new warehouse in the U.S. This is one that's close to us. The one that we used for Toma Adventure Design, we decided to change from that one and go with one that was really, really close to our house so that we can drop in and ask questions and see how things are going and all of that. But since this is the first time that this warehouse has worked with us, is another reason why it's a good idea to do something that it doesn't require them to assemble complicated orders. It's just going to be, this book in some number of multiples, and we'll probably throw in the ability to order Tome of Adventure Design as an add-on as well. But it'll be very simple for the people in the warehouse to pick and pack the thing.
Right on. And Chris, I think this is probably a Tim Kask joke, but I'm going to go ahead and say this anyway. Chris Kane says, thoughts on the speed of a lightning bolt?
I don't know, Chris, man. I don't know what you're referring to there. That could be a lot of things, and probably, I don't know.
I will relate to you that there's there was a gentleman, he was a coworker of my wife's, used to play D&D with us here in the Orlando area. Of course, for a few years, Dave Arneson taught out at Full Sail, which is an art university here in Central Florida. I think they have campuses lots of places, but Dave Arneson taught game design, and this fellow who gamed with us gamed with Dave Arneson and played in some of his original fantasy adventure games. I don't think he even called them Dungeons and Dragons. I think he just called them original fantasy adventure. But the thing is like when Dave would go around the table and say, okay, make a saving throw. Okay, well, I'll make a saving throw. What are you doing? What, the lightning bolt's coming. What are you doing? You failed.
Duck down, duck sideways. Yeah.
If you didn't have an answer right then, it's like, well, you stand there dumbstruck and you get hit by lightning. Don't even bother making your saving throw. And it was that case. Lightning bolt was being cast down the corridor, and he said, I throw myself to the floor. And Arneson's response was, well, you're not faster than the speed of light, so no save for you. So those of you who might think of Dave Arneson as the kindly old man of tabletop gaming, he was quite the killer DM. And
I don't think anybody was thought of Dave Arneson that way. All of the stories I've heard about Dave Arneson was that he was, more lethal than Gary.
Yeah. So Volcano God has kind of an in-depth question, and Lord Cass, I'll get to yours after. Could you, and I think that's you, not me, obviously, could you talk about the decision behind making the design of the elf in Swords and Wizardry? It seems like you missed the intent of the OD&D design. You decide which class to assign XP to each adventure. Instead, it is making you decide which class your elf is every adventure, which doesn't seem right.
Well, so the description, one of the things about elves is that the description in the first 3 books is then changed when they come out with the Greyhawk supplement. And so I think we relied pretty heavily on the description that was in the first 3 books and then adapted that with the ability to have the other classes like the something beyond just what's basically a fighter magic user. And the description that we've got in there certainly matches up to some of the language that's in OD&D for some reason. I mean, without actually looking at it, I'm not sure the way it goes. But I think the answer is that I'm probably looking more closely at the description of the elf in the first books rather than the ones in Greyhawk.
Okay, fair enough. I hope that
I can hang on. I'm going to go get my copy of Greyhawk. You keep talking, Bill.
All right. Well, while he does that, I'm going to get my copy of Greyhawk.
I got my copy of Greyhawk here.
Hang on. I have my here. I have my omnibus version here. This is all the supplements. What are we looking at? The elf, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So
elves are 5 or more feet in height. Blah blah blah.
So we got thieves, fighting men, dwarves.
Yeah, I think I actually need to be looking not at Greyhawk, but at the original one to find out where the origin of this question lies. So men and magic, elves. Now we're looking at men and magic. This is men. Whoops, that's men and magic. Elves can begin as either fighting men or magic users and freely switch class whenever they choose from adventure to adventure, but not during the course of a single game. Thus, they gain the benefits of both classes and may use both weaponry and spells. They may use magic armor and still act as magic users. I mean, that was the switch back and that's where the switch back and forth concept comes from, is that they can freely switch class whenever they choose from adventure to adventure, but not during the course of a single game. And so I think that answers the question of at least why it was that I did it the way that I did, or at least it begins the answer to that question.
Yeah.
If I understood it right. But what OD&D did not have was the idea of race as class. That was something that was built in with BX to simplify the division process, and also the division of experience, and also the question of when do you move up in an ability. It's much easier if you've just got a single class of elf, as opposed to an elf who is operating as a fighter, magic user, thief all at one time, or as a fighter thief, I think was one of the options for elves. But the thing is that in OD&D, it really does get complicated, because you start in the initial box set with this idea only of an elf is somebody who can use both magic and armor at different times. But then when you get to Greyhawk, suddenly you're adding in other classes as options, and that's just, it's confused, and it's a clunky leap to make because of the things that they'd already said in the first 3 books.
Right on. And I would point out just a little bit of interesting history inside baseball. Those of you, of course, know that I worked on the Teeth of the Barkish Noir module for Gary, which didn't get published for various reasons, yada, yada, yada. The notes I had from that actually had the prototype for multiclassing, because there are multi-classed characters in the pre-gens for Teeth of the Barkish Noir. And Gary made notes on what multi-class was. And I think he wrote that in 76. So he had a mind for multi-classing demi-humans all the way back then, that hadn't gotten published yet. Just a little bit of D&D history for you folks out there. So let's see here. I don't want to have missed any questions. Matt, not you, a Matt in chat says, is it easy? Matt in chat, is it easy to move from Swords and Wizardry to Osric, OD&D to 1E?
In terms of like learning one first, I mean, yes, they're very, very close. Generally, what happens when people move from OD&D to first edition AD&D is that they trip over the little differences. Like, OD&D only has 3 alignments, whereas there are 9 in AD&D. AD&D has a fairly strict official initiative system, which is in there, and nobody knows what it really is, because it's been discussed and there are actually some contradictions in there. But I would say it's easy. It's certainly easier to move from Swords and Wizardry to AD&D than it is to move. It's the hard part about moving game systems is from moving from something that's more complex to something that's less complex. Because when you're playing a more complex game, you have in your head that there have to be rules for this, that, and the other thing. And when you move to the simpler game, you feel like those rules are missing, but they're actually not. It's that people are playing it differently in order to account for those things. So it's way harder to move from like 5th edition D&D to either first edition D&D or original D&D, because people who try and do that think to themselves, there is no rule for an attack of opportunity. There is no rule for playing for how well can I play a harp to get an effect from doing that. Where that type of stuff is just sort of hand waved and DM ruled in the earlier editions, and it's a perfectly complete system that has the DM making those rulings and doing things on an ad hoc basis. But if you expect to see them codified in rules, then it's kind of jarring when you go to a system where it's not codified in the rules. So from OD&D to from Swords and Wizardry to Osric, or from OD&D to AD&D is not a hard leap, I don't think. You've got the basics of it, of the way it works down.
And that was the case that I found when I was a kid, and I had both basic D&D and AD&D. It didn't seem that big of a leap to change things between them. Zachariah Edwardson asks, will you reissue Swords and Wizardry Core at some point?
So we're getting this question both about White Box and Core, about whether we're going to do those. I think the answer for White Box is rising to the point where it's almost certainly going to be a yes. As soon as we can get to it, we'll do a version of White Box. Core, we've got, I think there are fewer Core players. And what Core, so let me do a real quick pressy for anyone who's not familiar with the other versions of Swords and Wizardry. White Box, Swords and Wizardry White Box is just the rules from the first 3 books, the ones that were contained in the box set of original D&D when it came out, with no reference to anything that came later. And so that's the one that's got the everybody has 1d6 hit points per die. You're just rolling a regular 6-sided die regardless of what class you are, and a bunch of other things that are not fleshed further out than that. Monsters have a d6 hit die, for example. So that's Swords and Wizardry White Box. Swords and Wizardry Core is basically the version of it that I played, at least back when we started publishing this, which is mainly the first 3 books plus some stuff from the Greyhawk supplement. So it does have, for example, the varying hit dice for character classes. I think the smallest of the Swords and Wizardry groups is probably Core. So I don't know whether we're going to reissue another Core version or just keep with the one that's out there for now. White Box probably will get a Mythmere Games edition.
Excellent. So let's talk about the Kickstarter a little. If you want to, do you have a link for it yet for when it goes live?
Yes. And
see me over in the green room private chat, and I will paste that up on the screen so folks can see that, because we got a question about it, and I didn't want to leave it fallow. This was Lord Koss. This was a minute or two ago. He says, "When does a Kickstarter start for this?" So
okay, well the pre-launch page is up, and I've just sent you, Bill, a link to that in the private chat here. It's the same link that will get you to the Kickstarter when it does launch. So you're not going to need 2 things. But the question of when it launches, I can tell you a fairly narrow range. It's going to be somewhere between either the 28th, 29th, or possibly the 30th. There are 2 factors involved with that. Or one factor really is, one is the question of when exactly Shadowdark ends. And I haven't really counted days, but I don't want to be launching a Kickstarter on the same day that that a mega Kickstarter that's in pretty close proximity interest-wise, that's ending, because there are going to be lots and lots of people spamming Shadowdark's ending, go back Shadowdark, all of that going on, and that's going to suck the air out of the attention zone. And I think we're probably better off launching before Shadowdark ends rather than after, because I think people will be in a level of interest of talking about OSR type games. So I'm thinking probably we're launching the 28th, and that's assuming that we're able to get from the warehouse the shipping costs to various countries and put all of those in. I mean, it might slide as a result of our not getting some of the details done on the actual Kickstarter, but we're aiming for the 28th, but that's not guaranteed. So that's a pretty narrow zone. So it'll be before the end of March.
Well, keep an eye on that URL, folks. Open that in a tab and leave it open, bookmark it, favorite it, however you do it.
Just go ahead and click, just go to the link that Bill put up, click notify me. You're not promising to pay any money. You can decide not to back the Kickstarter later on, but this will at least make sure that you get pinged when it does launch. So you won't miss it. It'll be in your email. So
exactly. So you don't have to keep sitting there hitting refresh. Let's see. Brian Scott's Game Night, he kind of came in a little bit later. I was trying to give him the 30-second elevator pitch, but says he was confused on the various covers you'll be offering. I see the 2, and in an earlier interview you were saying how to get each was just asking for clarity.
Yep, and we can go ahead and answer that, because there may be other people that came in, because that was very much at the beginning of the interview. Those 2 covers, one of them is the offset print cover, and one of them is the print on design cover. The offset cover is the blue one. The print on demand one is the Arrow Lotus cover. Some people will probably choose to get both, but the blue cover is probably going to have the higher quality binding, because there it's going to be sewn binding, but there's going to be wider worldwide sort of thing on the POD version. The Arrow Lotus cover. Neither one of them. I'm not a big believer in Kickstarter exclusives. I think we may have an option for a signed and numbered copy on this, but the only reason I ever see to do an alternate cover and charge differently for it would be if that cover is really in a different genre. I mean, if you were doing one that had woodsy, druidy, Celtic sort of feel to the game, and another one that was super swords and sorcery kind of feel to the game, I can see doing that. But I don't generally favor doing special, gimmicks, really. So, I mean, I see the value of it, and a lot of people love them. It's certainly a great way of somebody who wants to back your Kickstarter and wants to, throw more money at you, of letting them throw more money at you. But it also makes the people who don't have the cash available, feel kind of bad, that there's this thing out there that I can't afford. And I try and avoid creating that feeling in people. So,
yeah, FOMO can be kind of, on the one hand, you can say, there's only 5 of these, or there's only 10 of these, or there's only 50 of these. But, it can, I think it can bruise some feelings,
Yeah.
It can lend to a notion of, oh, well, the good stuff, I guess that's just for you elite people who have.
Right. That's the thing. You never want people to feel like the good stuff is behind a paywall.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's goes back to, I mean, before or around the time of this, when I would sit down and I would play OD&D with people, they say, yeah, but you got to pay like $50 or $60 for an OD&D rule set. This being like 2004, 2005. Now it's a little pricier. And I would always say, no. They have these as PDFs. Get them. Even if you burn through a toner cartridge in your printer and staple them in the corner, print them out. Don't feel like this is some super rare thing. And that was always the why of why I would run it. I would say it's fun. It's easy to pick up, and you can get it. I mean, granted, it was at Wizards of the Coast Countenance, but yeah, I never like there to be some big financial hurdle. The easiest way to get to play the game that you dig is always the best. Crap Phone says, thank you for being nice to poor people. Those of us on a limited budget appreciate that. Power, brother.
Also, what I've just done is I've just put the Kickstarter link. Oh, you did it too. So I just put it into the chat room on the side, because you can't actually click on it on the screen and do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the like guests and chat participants, it won't show up. Even if it shows up for you, it doesn't show up for anyone else. So I apologize if you have to type that, but I will put that. I will edit the description. I don't think I can do it on the fly for a live stream, but if you're watching this in the future, look below, because the Kickstarter link will be there. If you're watching this in the far future, say, 14 years from now, don't click on it. It won't do you any good to click on it. Don't bother. It's like driving up Route 66 and you pass the gas station that's been shuttered since 1952. It's like, don't pull over. It's not going to help you. But if you're watching this in the next couple of weeks, yeah, absolutely click on it. So let's see. Oh, Crap Phone, I agree with you. One of the best things about our hobby is that it's egalitarian. All are welcome, no matter what. And it's like Mike Carr said in the introduction to the AD&D Player's Handbook. It's a game of diversity. There are diverse players. There are players from everywhere. There is a question here. Le Chat says, speaking of the 3 LBBs, why didn't you put the rules about PCs walking near a stronghold where they could be chased, invited, or ignored with a strong...
I love those. I love those rules. Problem is, that is pretty much creative expression there, and so that I was really concerned would be sort of a copyright violation type of thing, because it's a rule out of nowhere. It's really it's quirky, and I think we're in probably a better legal environment now than we were back in 2008 when I first published this. Actually, we're not. What we didn't know at the time was that we were dealing with the most permissive Wizards of the Coast that there had ever been. So let me take that back and reverse it. What we've got now is a somewhat less kinder, less gentler Wizards of the Coast in terms of that stuff. But that was just because it was a concern about legality, and in some cases certainly. I've made a legal call that may be too conservative, but if Wizards of the Coast ever drops all of OD&D, into the Creative Commons license, then we'll be able to go in and get that stuff into Swords and Wizardry as well.
I did a video because they've, as part of their public-facing apology, but behind the screens probably not really changing their minds all that much, transparency tour that they're ongoing right now. This was on Wednesday or Thursday. They basically released, it's like a PowerPoint slide, and in the ongoing section is working on porting older versions of D&D into the Creative Commons. Now, some people have said, no, I'm completely black-pilled on this. What they mean by older editions is 3.5 to botch up older Pathfinder, and 4th edition to shut people up about that. You'll never see basic, expert, AD&D, or 2nd edition in the original D&D in the Creative Commons. I'm not gonna speculate either way about that, but I certainly hope it happens.
Yeah, I hope it happens, but I tend to be in the group of the people who are thinking that what they're really talking about is 3.5, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So, because they haven't done any sort of legal review of any of the older stuff as to what intellectual property they might be giving up if they were to drop all of that text in there. They have done a legal review of 3.5, and 4, and they've got a pretty good idea of what's in there. So I think they're really talking about the ones that require the lowest effort on their part, which is understandable for a company. But,
sure.
But if they do, then that's great. Then it's off to the races in all kinds of different ways. But I don't think they're going to do it.
Well, and at that point, the biggest problem of the hobby in modern days is all these lawyers writing role-playing games.
I know, right? The sooner people like me are out of the hobby, the better. Lawyers.
Matt and I have a little shared-in joke about lawyers and dealing with RPG stuff. By the way, Ty Beard says he will be in contact with you.
Yeah. Ty, I'm in Texas now, so yeah, he'll be in contact with me. He's my lawyer, so we're.
Yeah. You're in Texas now, so you're just 9 hours away from him.
About 4, probably. So
yeah. What was the joke? I drove all the way through Texas, and when I got to where I was going, I was still driving through Texas.
Yeah.
Brian Scott asked, though, and I think this is salient to our little joke there, though. It brings up another question. There are some very big Kickstarters going on currently and in the very near future. Did the OGL mess push you to do this now?
No, the main thing that got us going, and we've been working on it for a while, was simply because of leaving Frog God, and Frog God was selling through their box sets, and so we figured we'd let them sell through the box sets while we did Tome of Adventure Design. And then the next thing was going to be a Mythmere Games version of Swords and Wizardry. So we had been working on this for quite a while before the OGL thing happened. And so that was a real bombshell, because I was like, wow, we may just about be having to change every word of this book that we've already done all of this work on. But as it turned out, not. So no, that the only people who are really affected by the licensing thing with the OGL are the third-party publishers who would be or will be publishing adventures and monsters and things like that for Swords and Wizardry. They would be affected by that. Anybody who has previously published a resource for Swords and Wizardry would be affected by that. But it's going to have very, very little effect on the players, except for the availability of resources coming from third-party publishers. But it's really not. It's not. As long as there are third-party publishers, which I think Wizards could have really put an end to that. But as long as they're out there, then the players will have pretty much the same experience. There'll be stuff available to get. So.
Right on. Well, I hope that answers your question there. Who is that? Brian Scott. I hope that answers that. Will wants to know, where's this Holy Avenger at? Just add it to the game. Write it on a page. Holy Avenger +5. You know what to do. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, Matt.
Yeah, no. Holy Avenger. Is there a Holy Avenger in the 5th edition SRD? I'm not sure that there is. I think that may be the reason why it isn't in there. Well, I'm still working on the reversed cleric spells. Here's the problem I have with the reversed cleric spells. There is no evil cleric class. So it's actually a monster called either an anti-cleric or an evil high priest, depending on which line of Gary's writing you're talking about. And that monster has the ability to cast those spells. So I'm still working on it. Let me get done with the spell reversal before we get to the Holy Avenger.
There you go. All right. Just write it on a note card and put it in your book. Anyway, so
Will has been tremendous help though with the errata, because errata is very difficult when you've gone through a whole bunch of books, with a fine-tooth comb, and then you're done. You never ever want to do it again. And so having people who are able to spot the stuff, that's a mistake or a misstatement or something that was left out or whatever it is, unbelievably useful in any of the retro clones. The same with Osric and all the others.
Oh yeah. So we got a few more stacked up here. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Joe the lawyer, are you finally adding gnomes?
Joe the lawyer's here. How's it going, man?
It's getting pretty attorney-ish up in this place.
I take back everything I said about lawyers.
Are you finally adding gnomes and monks to Swords and Wizardry?
No, well, monks, yes. Monks have been incomplete for a while. Gnomes, no, because the game. I'm convinced now that the only reason the game has survived since 2008 in a hot competitive environment where a dog-eat-dog world, everybody's trying to take you down. The fact that this game doesn't have gnomes in it is the only reason that it survived. So if I put gnomes in it now, I'm dead. So I can't do it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, there you go. And let's face it, gnomes only got in there because of that coffee table book that was published in 72 or 73. That's that. I firmly believe that.
And if anyone hasn't seen that coffee table book, it's great. I really recommend taking a look at that. It's called Gnomes.
Yeah. It was actually a lot of fun to read when I was a kid.
I loved that book.
I was a little scandalized because there is actually nudity in it.
Yeah, there are some penises and things. Yeah.
I was not expecting to see bare-breasted gnomish women in that lovely little. I think people that bought it and set it on their coffee table, it was just popular and a big book to put on a coffee table in the 70s. Oh, a fanciful cover. Oh, gnome prawn.
Yeah.
Yes. So there you go, gnomes, and why not use them? But there was. Let's see. My kids love that Gnomes coffee table book. That's great. Let's see. Father Enion asks, speaking of third-party publishers, what is the S&W compatibility license going to look like?
Okay, so first answer to that question is there definitely will be one. We're waiting at the moment to see whether something comes out from the Orc license. Mark Greenberg and I have worked together a little bit on a different license, which is much more like the OGL license, except fixed, so it's irrevocable, so on and so forth. Simply because, and the OGL is not the best license out there in the world, but the thing is, people are familiar with it, and learning a new license is very, very difficult if you're a publisher and you don't have any legal training. So there's this other argument to let's just stick closely with what we know. And only change what we have to. And so I have, on my computer, a possible third-party license. And I'm still talking with Mark also because there's one question about the trade. In the regular world, you don't really need to have a trademark compatibility license. The only reason you have to have that is because the OGL mandates that you cannot mention other people's trademarks. But in the real world, you actually can, as long as you're not doing it in such a way that confuses you and the person who actually has the trademark. So there's a question of if we dial back this other license to the point where it's just saying you're not going to impinge on, you can use fair use of other people's trademarks, then you don't even need a trademark compatibility license. The way that I had written it before Mark's comments was simply to say, you can't violate the trademarks of someone who has contributed stuff into, and that way, if you want to talk about a Hershey bar, you can do that because Hershey is a trademark, but you technically can't mention any trademark in something that's done under the OGL. So I was dialing it back a little. Mark has suggested dialing it back even more, and I just need to think about that, whether that creates any problems. But I think I'm assuming that the ORC license is also headed toward what the big problem is with the Creative Commons license, which is that it is largely all or nothing unless you do some extra work to separate your product identity from your open content using the OGL terms. But the stuff that you want to keep closed, you can't keep anything closed unless you release, a separate thing, which is inconvenient for publishers, small publishers, because you may not want to create an entire separate PDF that has all of your intellectual property stripped out of it. So in that sense, the OGL method of saying you can say what is open and what is closed is probably preferable to RPG publishers, given what it is that we're doing. So it's still an open question whether we're going to use the ORC license or whether we'll use the one that we've been working on separately, but there will be an open license of some kind with Swords and Wizardry that will allow not only publishers to use Swords and Wizardry, but will allow a publisher to open up some of their content for another publisher to use. So if you publish a monster book and you want to have people use your monsters in adventures, there will be a way under the license to do that. So it's going to go a little bit beyond the Mork Borg license. The Mork Borg license just allows you to do something using the Mork Borg property, but there's no publisher to publisher, peer-to-peer sort of open content with the Mork Borg license. We're going to go a little bit further than that. But since we have got a large, talented group working on that same project with more lawyers than I have, if they come up with something great, then wonderful. I don't really have to worry about, did I, screw up any of the legal drafting on this thing. So that's the answer is there will be one. I don't know which one it'll be yet. And now we're talking about licensing, right?
Right. And this might go into that a little bit. Brian's been waiting for a response on this for a few minutes. And I hope this isn't a sensitive topic. If it is, Brian, you and Matt are going to have to hash that one out. But if it's been brought up before, you're not wanting to talk about this, sorry, but why did you break from Frog God Games?
That's not something I'm going to talk about, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that there's a we've got a contract where we agree not to talk about it. I can tell the fan base there is no war to be had here. There's no controversy for anyone to worry about getting up in arms about. So
okay. All right.
The key answer there is that I like working with other people, but I'm also a little bit more of a loner. Frog God had gotten to the size where there were multiple people working on projects. There were more schedules, and so it's easier for me creative wise, to be off and be my own boss on the stuff. So it frees up the creativity wise.
And I completely get that. And this is to a lot of people, a lot of wonderful people ask, hey, why don't you just let me admin your Discord? Or, I can do YouTube stuff, run your YouTube. And I'm like, that's really awesome. And I appreciate that you're watching me age in real time as I try and keep up with this stuff. But that's, if it all collapses, then it's just me, it's just on me. So I completely get that, kind of going your own way. But back to the fun stuff. Crap Phone, again, I love the username, asks, could a third-party person submit something to you for approval before publishing?
Well, you don't have to. Is part of the point of an open license is that you don't even need to do that. If the question is doing that before the license comes out, I think the license will be out before the Kickstarter will either put it into the book or it may require a separate SRD type thing going out there. So I don't know why you would want to do that. So I'm either missing part of the question or else the license is more open than you think it is. Because the thing is, if you comply with the license, then you don't have to get any approval for it.
Right. And I think that if I could tack a follow on, maybe this is what he was asking, or maybe there's people wondering about this right now, is just going to speculate. The answer is probably not at this time, but is Frog God accepting any submissions from freelancers?
Is Frog God? I don't know.
Frog. I'm sorry.
Is Mythmere? Right at the moment, no. But if you have something that you want to pitch that's real close to the swords, if it's like an adventure for swords and wizardry or something like that, then yes, go ahead and email me. The email is matt@mythmeregames.com. And I'm actually going to look that up and make sure I just gave the right email address out. So
matt@mythmeregames.com. It's in the chat.
mythmeregames.com. Yes. So if anyone wants to pitch, but the point being, we're not really looking for stuff like that. But some things, adventures or something like that, it might be something where there's a good mix there. So.
Okay, well, there you go. You can send that to matt@mythmeregames.com. And I apologize in advance, Matt, because I'm going to email you a copy of Bio 1 in PDF. I'm so sorry for that email you're going to get from me. I really am, but I'm going to do it anyway. If I have to suffer, so do you.
Okay, fair enough.
Hey,
how are we doing? How are we doing on getting everybody to send you to North Texas?
Well, we're at $4.99 minus your $25 pledge. So Joe with a super, and we thank you so much for that, says, not sure the book size you're contemplating, Matt, but for my old eyes, the digest box set was too small. And when does the, I think that's supposed to be KS, keep working on that eyesight, Joe. When does the KS go live?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is this is a full-size letter size thing, so there's not the issues with font size that you get with digest size books, and it will go live sometime between the 27th and the 29th of March of this month. We're not 100% sure yet. We actually did talk earlier about what the things are. Shadow Dark is sort of a big issue. I don't want to launch on the same day that they're ending, so that's. Probably the when of it.
Right on. Couple more questions here. Brian Scott, Game Night. Are there plans on beefing up Mythmere's Discord?
Not well. Okay, so here's the problem. The problem is I don't like Discord because I have to open it up separately. It doesn't work well for me on my web thing, and so until somebody is who works well with Discord, we're probably going to have very light coverage on Discord just because it's not my preferred social media, and we're not a large enough company for me to be able to hire somebody who can have as their job doing that. So the answer is probably not, although we will try and work on it. Discord is our weakest of our social media interactions.
Brian Thomas says, Matt, will you be writing new Swords and Wizardry adventures, and will the Spire of Iron and Crystal adventure ever be reprinted?
Well, I got the rights to do Spire of Iron and Crystal, and I'm not sure that it's not on our website, but it may not be. Yes, Spire of Iron and Crystal will eventually be reprinted by Mythmere Games, absolutely, because that's one of my favorite adventures that I've done. So it will be, if it's not up already, on the website. And as to other adventures, yes, I will keep writing them. I can't really come up with adventures really on demand. When I get something that becomes something that I can't ignore going on in my head, that's usually when I end up writing an adventure. So yes, they will be coming out, and again, if we do talk to freelancers down the road, we'll begin working our way into the more adventure centric. We got to get the basic stuff out for the new company. Then we will begin focusing more on the supplements and stuff like that. So the adventures, the GM screen, all of that stuff.
Excellent. Well,
okay, there we go. Uncle Brad, $100. Does this sound better? That's $100 to get Bill over to North Texas. That'll probably get you almost through Louisiana. In fact, given though it's Louisiana, it might get you all the way across Louisiana.
That is that is a Greyhound bus ticket right there.
Yeah. And I'll put in,
granted, but
how do I put in my $25? Is there like a thing on here? I'm going to go click on YouTube.
If you go to the show on YouTube,
okay, how do I give money?
There's if you're signed into YouTube, all the way at the bottom of the chat on the right, there's a little smiley face icon. There's a little dollar bill icon. Dollar bill icon, and it will it will do that. Uncle Brat, I really appreciate that. God bless you. Thank you very, very much for that.
It says show support for Dungeon Delver. Super sticker, send an animated image. Super chat, send a highlighted message, or close. How do I give you money?
You can super chat.
All right, I click super chat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then it gives me a $10 option. We increase that to $25. You're worth $25 and not a penny more, as far as I'm concerned.
Not a penny more. Not a cent more.
You may be worth more to others. You know, I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying, all right, so $25, buy and send, and then it may ask me for a credit card or something like that. So I'm going to stop talking out loud when I do that.
All right. Yeah, don't rattle that off. Okay, guys. 4356-5177-0007-2266. Oops.
I'm working on getting you to North Texas here, so I'm working on this.
Okay.
I'm taking out my credit card.
Hold that down.
I have a cool Darth Vader credit card.
Oh, thank you, Amerifatti. I appreciate that. A live stream. I sneak in and do these time to time. Last week I was on and we were just hanging out on Gygax Day and just talking smack about stuff because that's a lot of fun. Oh, now I'm getting some natural light and the Swords in the Wizardry box doesn't look like garbage. Actually, for those of you who haven't been to the studio, I actually have one small window that the setting sun comes through. Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much.
That's right. We want to get you to Dallas. That all the way out of New Orleans, past Lake Champlain.
John Miller, and where is this money going? Oh, absolutely to travel funds. Please rest assured, it's certainly going to travel funds. I'm not going to buy beer with this. What are you talking about?
Absolutely not beer. If it gets to be enough to where you can't, because all the guys over in North Texas know that people were trying to give you money to go there. So,
well, I really appreciate this, guys. So regardless, O'Neill Flynn, greetings. Oh, Amerifat, Fuchsia Cone for transparency. Fuchsia's a big fan of the show. He hangs out with us on. A little bit on the Discord, but a lot on the chats, and it's lovely to see you. That would have been funnier but I don't. I'm dry right now. I have like an unopened bottle of wine, and we all have those little amounts of liquor in bottles in our houses. Although this is completely off the reservation. But I was walking my dog the other day and I passed a house and I'm really worried about the people who live there. It was garbage day. They had their recycle out. Dude, handles and handles and handles of vodka bottles. I mean, it was Sky vodka and it was just heaped up. I was like, you're going to die soon. You're not going to be with us too much longer. And I hope that's like the year. Like you just kept sitting them out in the garage and you're like, oh, I should probably throw these out. I've been doing this, but it would have been a lot finer if it had been beer, but I don't have any. No, thank you all for the super chats. I really, really do appreciate it. Let me. I don't want to miss any.
Enough about you. Let's get back to me because.
Let's get back to you because you're the guest. Right. Uncle Brat, you've pretty much bought the round. You can tell us what you want to drink. So, are there any questions that you have? You've decided not to use your alternates. Don't forget a bottle of Gru repellent for the trip in case the lights go out at the hotel. Yes, Zork, you are in a maze of twisty passages all alike. It is pitch black. You are likely to be eaten by a Gru. But let me not miss anything. I have a question for you. Okay, the new version, demons, devils, and psionics. Yes or no? Hey, before you answer that, a sale is hinging on this. Answer carefully. Go ahead.
Demons, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Devils, no, because we've got a 3-point alignment system instead of a 9-point alignment system.
So the demons and devils are just all kind of in there.
Exactly. There's no distinction between the two. And psionics, no, because again, this is the same problem that we had, with the illusionist and the things that got changed so much by the later licensed editions, that the psionics rules of OD&D are not replicated anywhere where we can legally get to them, touch them, and use them. So, and it's an entire system. So that is a downside of our demons, that they don't actually have psionics. But again, that's for a third-party publisher, because that's very low-hanging fruit, I think, for anyone who's a third-party publisher who is willing to take that risk, of getting tagged on something, where I am not willing to take that risk. But this usually, if you're a smaller publisher, you're more willing to go a little further in terms of the stuff. So if somebody wants to write a psionic system for Swords and Wizardry, you're welcome to do that. So but I feel like I'd be at risk if I did.
Of course. And I mean, this is, if it were 2005, 2006 again, I'd say, you could slip a little supplement. This Wizards of the Coast, no.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little more nervous about this Wizards of the Coast in terms of what they're going to do. So
I don't think
it's going to be now, but I think that what we're looking at, a couple years down the road, is we're going to see some cracking down. Let me talk a little bit about licenses, because this, I referred earlier to the fact that I had talked with Logar the Barbarian, Shane Thayer, about this, but here's the issue with the OGL. One of the reasons that Wizards was not going to be able to revoke the OGL in 2023 was because they've always said that they wouldn't. And they had on their website at the time that it was issued a thing saying, we won't do it, we will follow these procedures. And then with 5th edition, they followed those procedures. There's a principle in law, in contract law, that if you rely on somebody's statements about a contract, especially when there is an ambiguity in the contract, if you rely on their statements, that you can look at the course of dealing that's happened over time to find out what the correct interpretation of a contract is. And so if you're not clear looking at that license, whether or not it is revocable, the fact that they said things about revocability will come into play in the interpretation, right? Well, what is the most recent thing they have said about revocability? In 2023, they have said, we can revoke it. They didn't do it. But the thing is that now the course of dealing that was perfect up until that point in not allowing them to cancel the OGL has now been changed, because in that course of dealing, they have now said, yes, we can revoke it. So they're certainly not going to do it now, but a couple of years down the road, and I think this is part of what's happening with their transparency tour, is one thing they're not saying is that we cannot revoke the OGL. They are continuing to say that we can, and that actually will have some legal effect down the road in a couple of years if they do that. So that's concern number one. Then concern number two is a point that that I'm not well educated on, but apparently there's also something in federal law where if you've entered into licenses on a copyright thing, after a certain number of years, you can cancel those contracts. And that, I believe, would toll for Wizards of the Coast sometime in about the next 15 years. So there's another risk point based on the federal law of copyrights that would kick in at a later date. And that is the reason that we have decided not to stick with the OGL. Even though we can, we've decided not to. So there's my spiel on the licensing issues.
Oh, great. Thank you. That is very informative. Now, if I can throw in my my Alex Jonesian paranoid ramblings, I don't think they're going to do anything until 2025. Because 2024 is the 50th anniversary of D&D. They're not going to risk screwing that up.
Right. Also, they got their asses handed to them by the community over this. And so they're not going to they're not going to put their hand in the garbage disposal a second time anytime soon, but they are setting up they're certainly leaving open for themselves a situation that would be somewhat better if they did decide to do it down the road than what they had in 2023.
Yeah, without a doubt. And
there'll be a lot fewer people using the OGL also as a result of them putting into the Creative Commons license. So they won't have a unified front where absolutely everyone uses the OGL. By that point in time, there'll be a whole bunch of people who don't care because they don't use it.
And I tell you, we had a very, very, very smart cookie on the live stream on Thursday night. And of course, you and I talked about that. Stephen from Gripner.
He's a very, very smart guy.
One of the things that's Stephen Radney McFarlane from Gripner Games are working on, the Glimmering, which is a whole thing. You can watch that live stream. It's down there. But one of the things that he said, and it's one of those things it was so brilliant, it comes around to being so obvious that it almost comes around to being dumb, but then goes back around to being brilliant again. That, like, why wouldn't they do this? And he said he went to them just before they pulled the plug on recirculating all the PDFs. And he said, you want to know the best thing you can do? Release all that stuff for free. Just put it out there. You want to build permanent goodwill? Just make it free. Just say, here you go. Here's all the PDFs. It stops piracy, because if we put this stuff under lock and key, we're not making money off of it. If it goes out there for free, we make all the friends in the world. And like, the genius of that, just like, why didn't they? And their response was, Stephen, you're just not seeing the bigger picture. And the mindset, even back then, because that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
That was not this past January. That was not a few years ago. That was 15 years ago, that the mindset that we're dealing with, that you were just talking about, and I was talking about them after 2024, making their next move after they get their fingers sewn back on and stick their hand in the garbage disposal again. This is not the Wizards of the Coast of 2000 to 2005.
Yeah, the thing you got to remember is, and this is not a politically left or right statement, but don't put your trust in corporations at all. Don't love corporations. They're not people in the sense they're a corporate human being that have decisions forced on them by internal politics, by internal shareholder groups, by the requirement to make profits when you can do it. It's just people who say, I trust this corporation. That's not a good way to approach it. You can make predictions about what they might do, and you can try and push them to do one thing or another. But in the long term, much as one may love Dungeons and Dragons, don't love Wizards of the Coast. Try and get them to do what you want them to do. Reward them when they do what you want them to do. But it's not an anti-corporate statement. It's just a thing of, you can't. A corporation is not a thing that you can trust. It's like a cat.
Gary may have loved us all. TSR did not.
Right, exactly. That's a great example. Gary loved gamers. Gary, as the president of TSR, he could be a dick when he wanted to.
Yeah, that's why. Like, I always, and we talked about this last week with Gygax Day. I said, look, the time that I knew Gary, he was a very nice, approachable person. I've had people get right up in my face and say, I knew Gary in the 80s and he was not a good person. He was not nice. And I'm like, look, listen to what I'm saying. The time that I knew him.
Yeah.
So, I always like to make that caveat. And John, I hope I don't mutilate your last name, my friend. Dzadiek there in the chat says corporations don't care about you. No, they don't. The people might. You might pick up the phone and call somebody at Hasbro and they're like, dude, I feel you. I agree. I'm talking to you and I'm looking at my AD&D book sitting on the shelf of my cubicle, my Grenadier miniatures, whatever. The body politic, no. They don't care about you. Let's Although we have racked up a few questions. So Marcelo Sepulveda says, I don't know if it was asked, but what are your plans after the S&W complete new print?
Okay, well, I will give you out some information today, Bill, that I haven't actually said anywhere else. What we're planning for the next Kickstarter after this one is a computerized Tome of Adventure Design, and that will involve doing a lot of the less creative side of things that are involved in the thing, but to get it closer to where you can either, I mean, I think the lower use of this will be that, you can hit a button and it'll just generate a dungeon for you. It probably won't be instantly playable, but it'll have all of the stuff in there. Or, something that you can follow along through, making decisions and saying, re-roll this, re-roll that. So that's the next one up. Or the next one up will be the Kickstarter that has the supplements, monster book, GM screen, so on and so forth, just depending on which of those two projects comes into focus. But we're working with a partner company that does software design, and more news about that one later. It's not far enough along that I'm going to talk about that one in any detail yet, but that is sort of the next thing on the hopefully on the horizon.
Well, breaking news, guys. You heard it here first.
That really is breaking news. I haven't mentioned that to anyone yet.
That is awesome. I may cut this section out for a little thumbnail video then, because that's pretty cool. John Dzadiak asks, when will the Tome of Adventure Design be print be available to order outside the USA in Canada?
Okay. So what he's talking about is that there's on our store, which operates through the Shopify engine, there is a glitch going right now. But what you can do is just email us, because all that has to happen is that we have to look up the shipping amount and then send it to you, I think, as a separate invoice. But we can do it. It's not that can't be done, and those difficulties will probably be done with over the course of the next 3 weeks or so. In any case, part of that has to do with the warehouse. Part of it just has to do with our ability to make Shopify do what it is that we want it to do. But it is actually doable now. Just send us an email via the store and say, hi, I'm in Canada, I'd like to buy one. I'll pay for the shipping. Just tell me what it is, and we can work through that.
Right on. I don't think they accept jars of poutine in exchange, but just keep an eye on that. I'm teasing. I'm kidding. Lachette says no bards. Bards, yes or no?
No bards. That however will certainly, if we do an Unearthed Arcana type of thing, because I try and separate the stuff that comes from it's from real OD&D as opposed to stuff that I worked on and that has a lot of my thinking involved in it. I try and keep those separate so that it's as accurate a retroclone as possible. So if we do an Unearthed Arcana type of thing, then definitely there may even probably more than one bard option in there, because it's something that a lot of people like to play.
Right on. Well, then a question for me, a follow-up question, and I think you just actually kind of answered it, but I'll go ahead and throw this out there. So when you say more than one type of bard, I'm a guy, I love the bard. Like, I'm not that weirdo of current year who's like, the bard wants to have sex with everything. I just think bards are badass characters in general for what they can do. But I know a lot of people, even AD&D fans, are like, we need a bard that starts right. So, you don't have to game for a year and a half to get up to fighter, and then another, 9 to 11 months to get up to thief. So you can finally play a bard for 2 sessions and then the group breaks up. So when you say multiple bards, just if this is blue skying or don't want to speculate yet, I completely get it. But would you approach a bard class as like you would do like a start as a bard versus?
Yeah, I think start as a bard is more useful than the AD&D thing of bard, because like you just said, no one ever gets to play one because you spend all of your time working up toward it. So I mean, it would be start as a bard, and then it's just a question of is it spells? Is it magic user spells and thievery? Is it druidic spells and thievery? because the bard concept actually comes from Celtic mythology. So why not druid stuff rather than magic user stuff? How do the spells operate? Are you doing something that operates more like a sorcerer from the later editions, where you've got a small number of spells, but you can cast spells? There's a lot of different options for what you can actually do to hit the bard concept, and that's the reason that there are actually, I think, quite a few valid alternative approaches to it.
Right on. Let's see here. Uncle Brat, who's more than earned the right to ask, will there be pages at the end of the book to assist the DM? I think, if you're talking about like the pull-out sheets we got in OD&D, perhaps, or your AD&D books that had this page perforated for removal. What do you got, Matt?
I mean, there will be a character sheet. It won't be perforated for removal. I don't know. Uncle Brad, if you can clarify the question about what exactly you mean. I think not. We're not adding very much new content to it, but again, that usually, if we're talking about reference sheets or things like that, that's the kind of thing that will probably be in the second Kickstarter with the supplemental material, or just released separately as a PDF or as a stretch goal. If the thing goes up above $200,000, there are some things that are still open.
Right on. I hope that answers your question, Uncle Brat. But if you have follow-ups, you've certainly earned the right to ask them. Let's see. For the next Kickstarter, will you expand the rules for S&W? And that's LaShawn again.
Will we expand the rules? No. We have, like I said, we clarified a few of them. In terms of any optional expansions, again, that's probably the supplemental Unearthed Arcana type thing there.
Right on. Okay, that's a little back and forth with some folks in the chat there. So, man, this is this is quite the stack of stuff. What is the next big? I hate to use adventure path. Campaign. Are you doing a campaign? Are you looking at like a multi-module kind of against the giants kind of thing for Swords and Wizardry 2, or
no? But that's probably we may come out with the world setting, from my World of Jordiba from back when I had a YouTube channel, and we did some stuff on that, and there are a lot of people who like that. So may do a campaign setting. In terms of the adventures, I don't really know what we've got yet, because we really haven't turned to the question of that. Here's the thing with adventure arcs. Number one, you can have an adventure arc of 12 adventures. Your players will play number 1, number 2, then they will go sideways and explore another continent. Then they will come back and do number 7, and then they will go, do something else. And so those people don't tend to stay with those arcs, using the older type editions where the players have a little bit more perceived freedom to do whatever it is that they want to do. However, it's a very easy way to publish adventures as a publisher, if you can put them into a hardback book and sell it as one thing rather than dividing it up into multiple different things, because what you really pay for when you're producing a book is the binding. So one binding is going to be a lot cheaper for the customers than 12 different bindings on something. So there's not really a plan in place to do an adventure arc, though, to answer the question.
Okay. Well, you did kind of touch on a subject that I want to know more about, and that is, what are you going to start doing the YouTube channel again, or is that?
Well, not in that form, because doing the little camera from the miniature's eye view is just really, really difficult, because your regular type dungeon walls that you print are too low. So you're always seeing over the top of the thing. So there's all kinds of camera stuff that you're doing. And so it's a ton of work to make something that is still absolutely amateurish, with my thing. So, probably not finishing that YouTube channel. I did start, and also I've lost my password. But so the new one that I started up just for the one Don't Panic post about Wizards saying that they were revoking the OGL. I may start, I'll probably use that one for either a major topic like that, or maybe the occasional interview once I get interview stuff set up. So I'll probably use that, but I'm not trying to build up a YouTube audience channel monetized. I made probably all of $100 from the YouTube channel that I had over time. So it didn't turn out to be worth it, in terms of the effort that I was putting into it. My time's usually better spent writing than it is doing YouTube stuff.
No, I completely feel you. And a lot of times people ask,
you do, yeah.
When are you doing this? When are you doing that? And I'm like, I don't know. In between my live streams, and sometimes 5 and 6 videos a day. And even today, I was like, Saturday. Oh, I've got a live stream today. I need to take care of that. So. First of all, 1, this is not a complaint, and 2, this is not any shade on anyone who actually works with a capital W, but YouTube is a job. It's more than, I'll hold up my cell phone and talk for a minute, and then that's it. Well, when you start getting into it, studio lights, cameras, all that kind of thing, it does take up time. And the important thing that you've got to remember, not you, obviously, this, but anyone out there.
I do, but it's worth saying there's a lot that goes in behind producing YouTube videos that people just don't see.
And I mean, sometimes when it looks like, particularly the short videos during the day when Wizards has been screwing up, and it looks like I'm literally like sitting down in my seat, guys, you're never going to believe it. A lot of times that's like the 7th take. Because I've stumbled over, I stumble over myself, and I could probably fill a bunch of Blu-rays if I just edited out all the ums and and from my videos into tiny segments and then made a video out of them. So it's, it is a job, but the important thing to do, regardless if you're out there and you're thinking about doing this, is, even if it is a hobby YouTube channel about the thing you love, do make time for the hobby, or you'll start to resent the hobby and you won't want to do the hobby.
And that goes for publishing games and writing adventures too, very much.
Absolutely. You'll just come to sit down behind the keyboard to write, or behind the camera to record, and in the back of your head, there's a very small but loud voice saying, I cannot wait until this is done so I don't have to look at this stupid Dungeons and Dragons crap. And I love D&D, I like computers. My computer is motherboard and CPU are about 11 years old. It has a newish video card in it. I used to love computers. Now I just like them. Okay. But I love D&D, and I never want to wake up one day and just go, shit, I got to do D&D stuff today.
Yeah, I got to run a convention game. I've literally woken up, at a certain point and been like, God, I got to run a convention game, and I got past that. But you have to have tools to get past that, because if you monetize your hobby, it does become work.
Yeah, it really does. It's like a lot of people say, "Hey, why don't you do a painting stream?" Because of all the setup I'd have to do, lights, camera, and the way my camera boom is, it would basically be in my way. I would be leaning out. It would look like I was just like you were looking through my eyes, but I would basically be sitting back here painting so you guys could see it. And a lot of times I just don't want to take my entire studio apart to get that camera angle. And that's why I have my shelves of shame. It's because I want to paint this stuff. Anyway, we're getting a little too inside baseball here. You guys don't want to hear
And also, we should probably wrap it up because I think we're about to come up on the 2-hour mark. So that's a lot to ask.
No, Matt, you're not leaving. You can't leave. I haven't had this many folks in the chat in a long time. No, I get it. I get it. I just want to make sure we're not missing any questions. He'll just send us a Gregorian chant of supercut delayed thought sounds. That would be hilarious. Yeah, the whole monetize your hobby is a lot like work. But anyway, $1 million Kickstarter for Swords and Wizardry. Here we go. That would be awesome. I'm sure Matt wouldn't hate that.
No, well, I wouldn't, except it would be.
Matt.
I kind of promised that I would do stretch goals if we got up over $200,000. So, I'm okay with not making $1 million on it.
Well, I don't like to brag, but it was this very channel right here, live stream, that got Heidi Gygax and her husband's adventure module over their goal. Just saying.
Well, if you can kick me over $1 million, we'll do a thing. We'll get into the Kickstarter, and then we'll do a live stream and see whether you kick us up over the top of $1 million.
Folks, there you go. You know what to do. Spread the word. The Dungeon Delver effect is very real. That's all I'm saying. Got a couple more questions. Or a question. Another question for Matt. Will you publish Mire things? I think that's probably more things, unless there's a slime monster called a Mire thing. Will you publish more things about Jordoba?
That is the plan, but that is a little bit further down the road, because first we've got the computerized version of Tome of Adventure Design. Then we've got supplements for playing the game of Swords and Wizardry, the GM screen, monster book, blah, blah, blah. And so after that would be the point at which we would probably do something, with Jordoba as a resource.
Well, there you go. I think that's just about. I think that's just about it. The gauntlet has been thrown. Everybody buy a few lottery tickets, Dungeon Minister says. Marcelo, I think you can check the. I think you can check the. Let me get this here. Come on. The Kickstarter out to find those, but Marcelo's asking, what are the stretch goals?
At the moment, we don't have any that are planned. If we do get really large, we may do some. They'll be digital only, because I don't want to be adding any postage to getting people stuff. So there won't be physical stretch goals if we do put those in.
Okay, and there again is the Kickstarter link. It's in the chat. It's over there. I will paste it in the description after we're done with this. And Will Mistretta says, will you up your donation to $30 if the Kickstarter tops $1 million?
I figure if Bill is able to make $1 million on the Kickstarter, I'll probably upwardly revise the value of interactions with him from $25 to $30.
That's incredibly Caucasian of you. Thank you so much. I cannot accept. Guys, the house is saved. Anyway, listen, thank you everyone for being in the audience today. It was a lot of fun. Lashat, Uncle Brat, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really, really appreciate that. Matt, you're super. I hope I've been worth every penny of $25.
Well, to me, no, you got to get to North Texas for that. So
I got to get to North Texas for it.
That's right. I'm going to pay $25 to see you at North Texas.
Okay. But you'll have to no, I'm not going to say that. Uncle Brad says, tell Matt I heard. He heard.
He heard. Okay.
He heard to the tune of $50. So again, guys, it has been absolutely wonderful. Matt, I do have a couple of questions for you here. Unless you absolutely have to fly out of here.
No, go ahead. I do have to take my parents to dinner, but not instantly. So.
Okay. Well, they're offline questions, probably some stuff. John, I think he mentioned about the Canada shipping. If you wind back in the video, you'll find his mention there. But
send us an email if this is a question about the Canadian Tome of Adventure Design shipment. Send us an email. We'll send you an invoice for the shipping. The problem is that we can't pre-calculate the shipping amounts. So just send us an email.
MythmereGames.com. I'll throw his email address up there real quick, and you can send that off to him. Jorge says, thank you, Mr. Finch. Can I call you Matt?
Absolutely. Everyone can call me Matt.
All right. So there you go. But anyway, yeah, John, email them, Matt at mythmeregames.com, and they'll hook you up. So everybody, until then, like I said, Matt, hang out for just a minute longer, and I will see everybody. I'll see you all later. I'll be back Monday, and we'll have a show. We'll talk about things. I love you all. I mean that. Thank you, Uncle Brat, for 2 awesome super chats. Thank you, everyone, for participating, super chat or no. I'll see you guys around. Peace.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.